How is it rocking, Dween Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dween Nation and the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are right back. We just launched the quarterback and running back fantasy impacts of the NFL draft for the landing spots of these players after, this past weekend of NFL draft picks. After all, 257 picks were made, even some UDFAs we talked about last episode. But now we're diving into wide receivers and tight ends. We had quarterbacks and running backs on the last episode. But before we do that, Genoa, let me hear how you're doing, my man.
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, you know I'm doing great. This is about to be a fun episode with wide receivers and tight ends. A lot of good guys here, Justin. I mean, we have to get going. Yeah.
Let's do it because probably like as we were talking about, probably the most stacked wide receiver class we've ever seen in the NFL draft. And so there's a lot of names. There are literally, I wrote down 20 names that we are going to talk about. And then even some tight ends, throw in some tight ends that are interesting. But we'll start at the top. Marvin Harrison Jr. Is an Arizona Cardinal. Some were talking that the Cardinals would trade back. I never thought it would happen. They stick at 4. They get Marvin Harrison, automatically becomes the one in that offense. They have McBride. I'm not worried about McBride too much, like his the effect on McBride as well as McBride's effect on Harrison. Not worried there. I think Harrison kind of slots into already being a top 20 wide receiver, and that's without being bold. You could argue, top 15, even a wide receiver 1, because he's got some major talent, got a pretty solid quarterback in Kyler Murray, and has all the opportunity in the world in that wide receiver room. I'm super excited about Marvin Harrison. It might not sound like that because it's kind of late at night, but I'm very excited with what he will do this year. Just fits the prototypical wide receiver build, and obviously we've been talking about him for 2.5 years by now. So Marvin Harrison, clearly the wide receiver 1, probably the number 1 overall dynasty pick, unless you're doing 2 QB drafts. But quick thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Marvin Harrison Jr., Justin. When they get together, when him and Kyler Murray get on the field week 1, it's going to be one of my first things I am tuning into. This guy's box office, Maserati Marv in Arizona, changing the culture. I mean, I think, Justin, as far as real quick, with redraft leagues, are you going as early as like the 3rd or 4th round with Marvin there?
That sounds about right, actually. I think I'd be behind 3rd round, to be honest with you.
Okay, love him in Arizona. There's really not much to say. He's definitely the first pick overall in the draft. I'd take him. Well, maybe he can go Caleb, but I would say definitely the first 2. But I'm so excited for Marvin. I mean, that's just enough said.
Yeah, it's really, you don't even have to talk about him a lot. You just let the tape talk for itself and let the capital talk for itself. All right, so he was 1. 2, I had some debate in my mind, but I went with the talent and the opportunity, even though he's on not a great team. I'm talking about Malik Nabers for the New York Giants. I just love the talent. Obviously, he, automatically becomes the one. If Odunze landed in a spot where he was the one, like even in Atlanta, even though they have Drake London, if he had landed in Atlanta, I might have had him over Nabers. But the fact that Odunze is going to be the 3 makes me put Malik Nabers at the second best wide receiver. The LSU product, obviously, the Giants are reminiscing on the last LSU guy they had in Odell Beckham. But they picked Nabers at 6, some really high draft capital. I think he's in for a boom bust season. He'll have some big games, some bad games, but that's really due to the offense and Daniel Jones or Daniel Dones, if you ask Malik Nabers, because that was a funny interview. But what are your thoughts on Malik Nabers and Daniel Dones together?
Yeah, it's probably gonna be an on and off connection. I do like Daniel Jones a little bit better now. I like the Giants a tad bit, but Nabers is going to be, like you mentioned, he's going to have boom games. He's going to have some bust games. He's going to, get the majority of the volume, though. I think he'll be a high targeted guy, but he will have
Yeah.
some on and off games. I love Nabers. If he would have went to the Chargers, I'm still going to love him here in New York. It's going to take some time for him to be the number one guy now. But I think eventually he does work to it to be, one of those top guys in the league. He's going to have some great games this year. He's going to have some awful ones. And it's definitely going to be because of the Giants and definitely because Daniel Jones. But still like Nabers.
Still like him. Yeah, I'm behind that. To 3. 3 is tough. I know I mentioned Odunze, but I'm this close to putting Xavier Worthy because of the landing spot. And you know what? Screw it. I am. If you just saw the last episode, my boy over here, Genoa, had a really hot take with Xavier. Tell me what your thoughts on Mr. Worthy on the Chiefs.
Justin, with Xavier Worthy, this guy is the next Tyreek Hill in Kansas City. Mahomes, he is my favorite to win MVP, and he is going to possibly have nearing that 50 touchdown mark, but I'm going to give him probably around 41 to 42 for Mr. Mahomes. And part of that's going to be because of that offense. They now have Xavier Worthy. He is their Tyreek Hill 2.0. He's going to be the guy that's going to be getting deep. They do have Hollywood Brown, who's been good, not great. He has some couple injury concerns, but he's going to be able to play. So no Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown's going to be this the really good wide receiver too there, and they still have Travis Kelce, but they're going to be going deep, and I think Worthy's going to be that guy. He's a super fast guy, and Andy Reid is going to be able to dial up so many nice plays to get Xavier Worthy open. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be, on a mission to three-peat in the NFL. And fantasy-wise, he does take a boost. He has way better receiving cores than that last year. We are believers in the running game. So we do know that the Chiefs are going to be moving the football. And Xavier Worthy is going to be that yak kind of guy. Travis Kelce is going to do his thing. And Hollywood Brown, I mentioned, is going to do his thing. But as far as statistically, I think Xavier Worthy has potential to lead the league in receiving yards just because the system he's in, the talent that he has, the best quarterback throwing to him. I've mentioned that they possibly have the potential to barely lose 1 or 2 games. The Chiefs are going to be the number 1 seeded in the AFC, kind of fighting with Baltimore there. Mahomes is going to be in the MVP race. He is possibly going to win it. He's my favorite to win it. And it's just going to be another Tom Brady-esque New England, just typical year. Brady wins MVP. They make the Super Bowl. Definitely make the AFC Championship. That's what I see here in Kansas City. With all of that being said, Xavier Worthy is a receiver that you have to look as early as the 4th round in fantasy drafts because he is better already than Marquise Hollywood Brown. We do think that Travis Kelce will already be drafted by the 4th round. So definitely Xavier is the next guy you'll be looking at as far as pass catchers in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think you could argue definitely that Worthy could already jump past Marquise Hollywood Brown. Rice is looking to miss a couple games with with his whole off the field issues. So right off the bat, Worthy has the opportunity to be the number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, Kelce's not going anywhere. He just got a 2-year extension. But I like that. Worthy is a very interesting pick. I have him over Odunze just because of the landing spot. And guys, Worthy is not your next Sky Moore. I can put some money on that. Worthy's got more intangibles. He's got more wide receiver abilities. He's not just fast. So I like Worthy with Patrick Mahomes. And then at 4, I have Odunze because I know he's set in the offense as the wide receiver 3 day 1 with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. I don't foresee that Keenan Allen's going to be there more than a year or 2. DJ Moore is going to stick around, but when you're tied to Caleb Williams, who I expect to be a pretty good their next franchise quarterback, I think Odunze, with that talent, he has the opportunity to have a really good maybe year 2. Year 1 might be a little bit tougher, but I'm looking at it in more of a dynasty perspective because you could definitely argue guys right behind him like Keon, Coleman, and Brian Thomas have a higher value day 1 in the NFL. But here, before I get your comics, I'll throw in one more guy with him. I'll throw in Brian Thomas. Obviously, the LSU product drops to 23, I believe. And Jacksonville takes him. We thought that they might be okay with their wide receiver room after bringing in Gabe Davis. But no, they bring in Brian Thomas. Now they got Thomas, they got Kirk, they got Zay Jones, they got Gabe Davis, they got Devin Duvernay. Do you worry at all about Thomas's value in that offense? And then also, what are your thoughts with Rome Odunze?
So with Rome Odunze, I would actually make the argument just that you could put Brian Thomas over Rome Odunze just for this year. I think in Jacksonville, Brian Thomas is automatically number one guy. They do have some great compliments, like you mentioned there with Gabe Davis and Duvernay and Christian Kirk. But I do like Brian Thomas to be that number one guy in Jacksonville now. He's another guy that maybe after Worthy and Marvin Harrison are drafted is another rookie that you could look at and draft in the fourth or fifth rounds and feel pretty good about it. With Jacksonville, we're all familiar with that offensive game with Doug Peterson, and it's produced pretty good fantasy numbers in the past couple years when he was in Philly. So I do like Trevor Lawrence to move the rock around and get Brian Thomas some touches and some a pretty decent year. I like Brian Thomas this year. And Dynasty, he's a top 7 to 8 pick, definitely in the first. No, I would say he's the end of the first round kind of guy. Brian Thomas, just so much talent in this year's draft. But in redraft, I'm definitely looking at him in the 4th to 6th round. Definitely a good receiver you could pick up because Justin, I feel like he can get the volume there in Jacksonville compared to Rome Odunze. It's going to take some time. There's so many playmakers there. Obviously, we hope not an injury happens because I love to see Keenan and DJ dominate for fantasy. And I'm willing to be patient on Rome Odunze. He's definitely going to get wide receiver 3 looks, kind of like Jay Ascended in Seattle this year, kind of just coming on towards the last couple weeks of the season. But I definitely, Rome Odunze is going to be kind of on and off. Definitely we won't hear from for many weeks in the season just because of what they already have in Chicago. So I do like Brian Thomas already ahead of him as well.
I like that comp for Rome Odunze just for the situation. Obviously, they're different player types. Odunze is more of an outside guy. But yeah, I'm interested to see how that unfolds. Both are pretty deep wide receiver rooms, but obviously DJ Moore and Keenan Allen outweigh the plethora of wide receivers in Kirk and Jones and stuff like that. So Thomas has a better opportunity to get touches early on. Sorry, excuse me. To continue on, all right, there's a good stretch of wide receivers that have some possible value. I'll talk about Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills, Ladd Mcconkey of the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm going to put A.D. Mitchell of the Indianapolis Colts. These are the next 3 guys. All are very interesting, especially Keon Coleman. We were really hoping, or we were just really excited to see what wide receiver joined the Bills. It's Keon Coleman. Obviously not a super speedy guy, but a guy that can go up and grab the ball. And when you're with Josh Allen, I'd be very excited for what Keon Coleman could be for this team. They trade back a couple times and still get him at the beginning of the second. Huge fan, to be honest with you, of Keon Coleman, especially this year compared to like Rome Odunze we talking about, where you could argue Keon Coleman will have a better year 1 than Odunze because of Odunze's situation. And then with Mcconkey, obviously they passed on wide receiver in the first. They get Mcconkey in the second. And honestly, whether you like Mcconkey or not, he's got the landing spot to be really exciting. Could honestly slot into wide receiver 1 automatically for the Chargers with Palmer and Quentin Johnston. Not very exciting, and Demario Davis. And then the last guy, A.D. Mitchell, who surprisingly drops in the draft. Didn't expect that big of a drop. Things came out about his character issues, which was surprising. But the Indianapolis Colts, they snag him in the second at pick 52. And he is now their wide receiver 2, it looks like. He has some lightning speed and could really take over Alec Pierce's role right off the bat. Genoa, what are your thoughts on A.D. Mitchell, Ladd Mcconkey, and Keon Coleman?
Yeah, so with Ladd Mcconkey, I'm not the biggest fan of where he landed, but they're valuing him now as the wide receiver 1 there in Los Angeles. So you have to believe that he's going to get his touches. And Justin, he's definitely a round 6 guy in fantasy redraft formats. Definitely, though, I mean, he's having Justin Herbert throw him the football, and you have to believe that he's going to have a pretty good season for them. Obviously, when we get later down to Brendan Rice, I'll talk about him. I'll have something else for that.
Yeah.
But Landon Mcconkey, you're going to have to believe he's going to get his touches, as well as Keon Coleman. He is now already the wide receiver one, the rookie now to Josh Allen. So you have to believe that he is going to be the guy now. And it makes, these drafts formats so interesting, Justin, this year, because there's so many great rookie wide receivers that you can go in the, third to fifth to sixth round, like Lad Mcconkey and Keon Coleman, and even A.D. Mitchell, Justin. I just feel like A.D. Mitchell is the perfect, complement to Michael Pittman Jr. I feel like with AR, if he's healthy, he's going to be able to get some deep shots to A.D. Mitchell. He has the speed and the playmaking ability to make it happen. But also another interesting thing, Justin, if, AR is having some health issues there in Indianapolis, they just signed Joe Flacco, who, hey, was slinging it all around the field in Cleveland. So, Joe Flacco, I would believe, would be able to be a great quarterback, too, to get the ball to A.D. Mitchell and give A.D. Mitchell some fantasy value. So definitely these three guys with Lad, Keon, and A.D. Mitchell, these are great, lower end tier 2 guys to target in fantasy drafts. And also makes, dynasty drafts really interesting. The volume is definitely going to be there. Two of these wide receivers have gunslinger quarterbacks, and one of them is on a really great team with the quarterback who only played 5 games, but we know AR is going to be good next year. So I do like A.D. Mitchell to already be that really good wide receiver too in Indianapolis. So I love all 3 of these guys.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I can, now that you pointed out, I can agree that I have the Mcconkey and Coleman over Mitchell just because their quarterbacks are gunslingers, as you mentioned. And with Richardson, his volume of passes won't be as high as most of the quarterbacks in the league, and they do have Pittman there, so there could be concerns with will Mitchell get enough volume. But I just like the landing spot and the opportunity because Pierce hasn't been anything so far in the league, and Mitchell's, I think, already a better talent than Pierce. So, yeah, with those 3 guys in the books, we move to the next 3 guys who I'm still really excited about. The Niners, obviously, at pick 31, they picked Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, who had that amazing, highlight career catch. But right now, as it look at it, I wouldn't be as excited because he would be in like a Rome Odunze situation with Debo, Ayuk, and then he'd be the third. But all the rumors are talking about how one of these guys is going to be on the move before the season starts, which would give Pearsall a huge opportunity. Honestly, I think he would jump up to top 5 consideration at the rookie wide receiver spot, because in a Niners offense, I'd be really excited to see what he can do as the wide receiver too. And then the next guy, Roman Wilson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think is worth, definitely worth mentioning. He joins an offense where I think he's already the wide receiver too. And I just think he was a really underrated talent, was a Senior Bowl favorite who you've heard me talk about that on and on. Roman Wilson, really excited. And Pittsburgh always develops good wide receivers. So excited about Roman Wilson. And then thirdly, Jermaine Burton out of the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously with T. Higgins requesting a trade, they don't have Tyler Boyd. Burton, obviously, they worried about off-the-field issues, but his on-the-field success is interesting to note. Obviously, he had some disappearing acts, but I think his talent is really impressive. He's been working out with T.J. Houshmandzadeh from, formerly a Bengals player. And so I think there's excitement around that pick for the Bengals, and I'm also excited. So give me your thoughts on those 3 guys. With it being Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, and Jermaine Burton.
So here's an interesting thing, Justin. I want to get slightly off topic. I should just say the 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals should just each get on the call together and trade T. Higgins to San Francisco and send either Brandon Ayuk or Debo to Cincinnati. So that way, all fantasy. This is a fantasy episode, Justin. So just brainstorm in there. Fantasy would be wild. T. Higgins in San Francisco would be nice. And as well as maybe Ayuk or Debo to join Jamar Chase there in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow would be super sick, super cool. But to answer your question here.
Hold up. Let's dive into that. I really like that idea and that concept before we get back to you with covering that.
Yeah.
But wow,
Go
okay,
ahead.
Ayuk for Higgins or something around that would be super interesting. Similar ages, they both want the big bag. Wow, that'd be super cool. Even though, I mean, you could argue it doesn't make total sense because neither of them want to pay their wide receiver, so why they'd want to pay another wide receiver. But I don't know. That's a funny concept, but I think that's really interesting and would make some serious waves in the
Yeah.
NFL. But anyway, go back to
Yeah.
answering
No,
with
I'm
those.
glad you got your take on that because that's definitely something that would be so cool. Anyways, so for these three receivers, Justin, I like Ricky Pearsall. Look, I'm a little worried about San Francisco, but here's the thing: they just drafted this guy at the end of the first round, right? One of these guys, Debo or both, Debo and Ayuk, is going to be gone, and so already Pearsall is already a guy that, like I mentioned with these other guys, a guy that you can look at in the fifth or sixth round. He's going to get the volume now. These guys are all slipping into possible wide receiver ones, if not definitely wide receiver twos. So Pearsall is already a guy that I like, as well as Jermaine Burton. I mean, if Higgins were to get traded and it's for an Ayuk, a Debo, I still like Burton to be that Tyler Boyd, gritty kind of guy that gets those, touchdowns when Jamar's getting double teamed. I do like Burton on certain goal line situations, guy that, Burrow looks at on, key third downs. Like I mentioned, a gritty kind of younger Tyler Boyd, and as well as Roman Wilson. I mean, see, these guys just can all become really good wide receiver twos because, with Roman Wilson, we're not 100% sure, if George Pickens is the guy yet. He had a pretty good season, but there was some issues there. Hopefully the quarterback gets that solved. Deontay Johnson was traded. There's not really another guy there on those receivers that are really that, talented. So I do like Roman Wilson to be a good wide receiver, low end 1 or 2 for the Steelers. Burton, a really good wide receiver, 2, depending on that trade. But the Pearson and Burton are really dependent on what happens with those wide receiver twos there and their prospective teams. But if, either of these players get traded to other teams, I do like Burton as a solid wide receiver too. If I had to rank them, I'm going to go, I mean, this is tough. I'm going to go for right now, Pearsall, Burton, and then Wilson. But, either one of these guys could be a number one. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, we just don't know. I think now, hearing you talk about it with not like just assuming, I mean, there's been no trade. So just assuming Roman Wilson has the quickest opportunity to become the one, or at least, warrant the most targets. But with obviously the rumors circling, keep an eye out for Burton and Ricky Pearsall. All right, moving to the next kind of tier of wide receivers, I have Javon Baker of the Patriots, Jalen Polk of the Patriots, and Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. I think one of these Patriots guys are going to make an impact this year. Yeah. Somebody's going to light it up. I'm leaning towards Javon Baker, believe it or not, even though Polk was the second-round pick and Baker was the fourth-round pick. But, I mean, this guy makes people in wheelchairs stand up, according to himself. So, Javon Baker, talk your stuff. I want to see it backed up, and I like the talent, though. I actually like the quarterback to be somewhat excited. Mac Jones didn't, warrant too much excitement for any wide receiver. But Drake May has that opportunity, so I like Javon Baker. Polk kind of falls right behind him. And then with the third guy I mentioned, and Troy Franklin, he gets to join his former teammate at Oregon, and Bo Nix in Denver. And there's an opening for wide receiver 2, unless you want to argue Tim Patrick. But Franklin, who drops to the 4th in a shocking turn of events in the NFL draft, has some real opportunity to be something in the NFL in year one. So, what are your thoughts on these three guys with Polk, Baker, and Franklin?
Yeah, Justin, you actually make a pretty interesting point there with Bo Nix reuniting with his, college teammate there in Denver. So you can make the case that now even, Troy Franklin can now become a wide receiver 1. I do like Cortland Sutton. He is a ball hawk there. but he's gone through some couple injuries. He's been there for quite some time. You can make the argument that injury is becoming wear and tear on Portland Sutton there in Denver. So Troy Franklin is the speed guy out of Oregon, and he fits well with Bo Nix, and in a Sean Payton offense, it could be some real firecrackers there in Denver. With these two guys in New England, though, it gets very interesting because I like Jalen Polk out of Washington, but New England always has that kind of edge to them where they get these later round undrafted kind of guys that become stars like Julian Edelman. So you never know with what's going to happen in New England. I do think now that you kind of set Drake May up in a really good offense. Mind you, Justin, they still have Hunter Henry, who's a solid tight end. They still have Juju and Kendrick Bourne, who's not bad. A solid running game, which we're not too crazy about in New England, but it's really okay there in New England. I do like Troy Franklin. And once again, Justin, I know I'm repeating myself, but these wide receivers have the potential to be drafted really, really in some really good spots in fantasy drafts. Looking at Jalen Polk through Baker and Franklin, they're looking like round 6 to 8 guys in fantasy redrafts. But there are going to be some steals there in the later part of all redrafts. Even if you could run a 12-team league, I mean, these are some great finds for 12-man teams. I'm not a big 12-man guy. I stick to 10 and under. But this makes draft formats really easy because all these guys can be really good wide receiver 2s, if not 1s.
It adds some serious depth to the fantasy wide receiver room.
Yeah.
I think round 6 is a little spicy. They'll probably go, I'd argue probably 9 or 10.
Okay.
But Franklin, I think, has the best opportunity, as you were talking about, because with his old teammate, and there's some room in Denver. With Polk, they got Polk, Baker, they got, as you mentioned, Pop Douglas, Juju, Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Ramondre. So it's a little crowded, but there's nobody that stands out kind of, at least not yet. And then these last stretch of guys that I'll bring up, we got Malachi Corley of the Jets. We got Brendan Rice, as you briefly mentioned, of the Chargers. Devontae Walker of the Ravens. And I also like to mention Malik Washington of the Dolphins. So that's a lot of names. I believe I just named 5 people. But all seriously have some serious opportunities, I'd argue. So Malachi Corley with the Jets, obviously they have Garrett Wilson, they have Mike Williams, but they don't have a gadget guy like Corley, so he kind of fits a niche role for the Jets. We don't love the landing spot just because, I don't know, I just don't think the offense is I don't know. There's just something that doesn't feel super right about it, but I do love his talent. And if he could, become what his comparison has been in Deebo Samuel, that would be really exciting for Corley. And then with Devontae Walker, he kind of is a deep threat guy who, for Lamar, they've kind of been missing that since Hollywood left, I'd argue. And so a 4th-round pick, but he could become, a deep threat, a wide receiver 2 for the Ravens. I don't know if I'll draft him unless he has a really good camp. And then with Malik Washington, to be honest with you, I think one of the most underrated, one of my highest sleepers out of the rookie wide receivers. He led college football in catches or in yards last year. So he has some pedigree, even though it was at Virginia. But I think he flies right into the 3rd wide receiver spot for the Dolphins. Because, hey, you could argue Braxton Berrios deserves that spot, but let's take the young guy with juice, as we've been talking about, and then Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, who falls to the 7th in a surprise, but the Chargers take him. They need wide receiver, and we like his tape. Definitely not a 7th-round pick. I thought he might go in the 4th or 5th, but he drops big time. But what are your thoughts on this handful of guys right here?
So with Malachi Corley, I'm hoping that the Jets include him in a lot of passing situations. Also some formations, kind of like what the Saints used to do, Justin, when Sean Payton was there with Alvin Kamara, have him run out of the backfield, throw him little dump-off passes, little dump-off screens. I feel like Malachi Corley kind of fits in that kind of situation. You mentioned the wide receiver depth chart there. So hopefully Rodgers, and when he's back and healthy, can kind of look to Corley to complement Garrett Wilson. We're not really sure how healthy Mike Williams will be. We're not really sure if he's going to be healthy when he's healthy. So they're going to need a number 2 guy there with the Jets. So Malachi Corley is a deep sleeper. In fantasy redrafts, I don't think I'm going to draft him. Definitely in Dynasty is going to be a deeper kind of guy, but definitely a guy you got to look at off the bat, off the first couple weeks in the season, and see how they utilize him. With Tez Walker, hopefully he can be Dez Walker as a Dez Bryant and be kind of a ball hawk for the Ravens, because the Ravens need a physical receiver, a DK Metcalf, like a Dez Bryant kind of like physical receiver there in Baltimore. They have some speedy guys. They need a guy that's going to be very critical for Lamar Jackson. They do have Mark Andrews there coming back. With Isaiah likely being pretty decent, but they need a really tough wide receiver. Hopefully Tez Walker is those real underrated guys that ends up becoming really great for Baltimore. Although, I'm not drafting him. Malik Washington, I honestly don't think he gets, looks there. There's just so many speedsters there in Miami, unfortunately. And with Brendan Rice, here's the thing. Here's my little take here. With Brendan Rice, I think he's better than Ladd Mcconkey. Sorry, I just think talent-wise, he's better. I think he fits better with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has a rocket of an arm. So he's going to be able to get, Ladd McConkey's going to do kind of his thing, but I think the touches eventually is going to go majority to Brendan Rice. His father, a legend in another California team. Here, come to LA. Here's Brendan Rice's team. He is going to be the number 1 guy in a team where there's not really a guy that's that talented. I feel like Brendan Rice could take over there. There's not really much competition there for him. And a tough Jim Harbaugh coach team, Brendan Rice now is a guy that you have to look out for. And Justin, I'm drafting him in the 8th round. The 8th round, I'm looking for Brendan Rice, maybe as early as the 7th. I got to see if I have my 3 running backs that I like. I have my ace quarterback to go along with already. Wide receivers are now leading, this fantasy, it's taking over. So I have to see what my wide receiver situation is. 7th or 8th round, Justin, I am looking down my list, and I'm looking for Brendan Rice. He's going to be the guy there in LA. He's going to make fireworks there with Herbert. You have to think with the Chargers, they had to have one guy being special there with a rocket arm like Justin Herbert. Someone's going to have a lot of success. Back then it was Keenan Allen when Mike Williams was healthy. Now none of them are there. It's going to be Brendan Rice. He's the now number 1 guy, Justin, in Los Angeles to play with Justin Herbert.
That's spicy. That's pretty spicy.
Yeah.
But hey, he could be this year's Puka Nacua, just on another Los Angeles team. And so, okay, yeah. And I think Herbert might be the best of the passers that we mentioned, like the quarterbacks that I know Rodgers is 40, Lamar is not the best passer. He's a great quarterback though. And then Tua, meh, but just great opportunity, great quarterback, good talent. But yeah, okay, could be this year's Puka. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, and just last 2 guys, they're teammates. One guy I really like, another guy I like pretty well. Ainias Smith of the Texas A&M Aggies joins the Eagles, and Johnny Wilson also joining the Eagles, Florida State guy. 2 very different players. Ainias Smith, a smaller guy who's speedy, and Johnny Wilson, who is 6'6", a huge guy, not too fast, but is a big guy that can climb up and grab it. Obviously, they have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. There's a possible third wide receiver role up for grabs between them 2 and Devontae Parker. But to be honest, for fantasy, they're obviously not going to be draftable, I don't think, for redraft. Ainias Smith could be I think he'll be how will he'll make a name for himself this season is in the special teams. Just a phenomenal punt returner. And then Johnny Wilson could arguably become a tight end, which we're about to talk about, because 6'6" guy, if you can't find a spot being a notable wide receiver for the Eagles, why not become Dallas Goedert's counterpart in that offense? But yeah, okay, just quickly before we move to the tight ends, what are your thoughts on these 2 new Eagles wide receivers?
Yeah, we're not really going to get much out of these 2 guys. There's so many mouths to feed there in Philly, so I'm not really confident we'll see much of them. Maybe some random games, some random breakouts, but not too confident that they'll have much this season with those pass catchers already there in Philly.
Yeah, with them also, extending AJ and Devonta Smith this offseason. The long-term future as well is looking a little bleak for both guys, even though I love their talents. Okay, that wraps up wide receiver. We talked about 20 guys. Maserati Marv, Malik Nabers, Odunze and Worthy, and Brian Thomas, and Keon Coleman, Mcconkey, A.D. Mitchell, Ricky Pearsall, Jermaine Burton, Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Malachi, Corley, Tez Walker, Malik Washington, Brendan Rice, Ainias Smith, and Johnny Wilson. That took a lot. Wow, that was a lot of breath. All right, moving to tight end. There's not that many guys. I have 7 guys listed. I think 1, maybe 2 has fantasy value this season, but a lot of them didn't land in wonderful spots. But we'll start at the top. Brock Bowers, of course, 13th overall pick, signs with the Raiders. Didn't love it for the Raiders just because they had a early day 2 pick in Michael Mayer last year. But Brock Bowers, I think, will automatically supplant him, become the tight end 1 for Gardner Minshew. But he's got Gardner Minshew, which makes me a little questionable, and the fact that Antonio Pierce is going to be a run-first, that's his mind. That's where he wants to go with his offense. Interesting fun fact, just to throw in here, Michael Gallup signed with the Raiders today. Another mouth to feed in this offense. So Bowers, I don't think will have a wonderful, tight end season. I don't think he'll be top 8 at the tight end position. Maybe we'll fall between 8 and like 14 or 15. So a low end tight end 1, but a higher end tight end 2 for his rookie season. But what are your thoughts on our top, Brock Bowers?
Yeah, so it's I do think he's going to have a pretty decent rookie year. I would probably say 800 yards, about 30 to 35 catches, maybe 40, and close to about 7 to 8 touchdowns. Pretty decent rookie year. That's just my ultimate ceiling for him. The only thing is he doesn't have a pretty impressive quarterback throwing him the football. Maybe if something crazy were happening where the Raiders can make an in-season trade for Kirk Cousins or something. I'm not sure how it works when you just sign him off the free agency, but they're going to need a better quarterback to get him the football. I feel so bad for guys like Davante Adams and Brock Bowers having to play another year without a solidified starting quarterback. So it's depending on how the quarterback play is for Brock Bowers. It's definitely quarterback dependent. It's a slight concern, but I'm still confident he has a pretty decent rookie year.
Nice. Yeah. I think it will be pretty solid. He won't break records like Sam Laporta, but it'll be pretty good. All right, at 2, I'm just gonna throw 3 guys out here because I think they all fall in the same tier. We're talking about Jatavion Sanders of the Panthers falls into a situation where he's going to have opportunities to become the tight end 1. They have Tommy Tremble, who's in his last year of his contract. They get him at the top of the 4th round. And then we also have Ben Sinnott of the Washington Commanders. They have Ertz there, but I mean, Ertz is almost a dinosaur. And it might start off slow because they're just going to start easing Sinnott in. As Ertz maybe helps mentor him. But I like the talent of Sinnott in this offense. He has opportunity to be the tight end 1. Logan Thomas had some moments of relevance, but I think Sinnott will be even better than him. Maybe even probably heading into next year, we could look at that more. And then lastly, Theo Johnson, who I think might be the biggest sleeper of them all, just because it looks like Darren Waller is going to retire, unfortunately. Theo Johnson will become the tight end 1 for the Giants, even though they have Daniel Bellinger, but he didn't really pan out for a starting tight end. That's why they brought in Darren Waller. But Theo Johnson, an interesting selection for them, and could be the tight end 1 for Daniel Jones on day 1. So, what are your thoughts with these 3 guys, Jatavion Sanders, and Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott?
Yes, these 3 guys get drafted into some really good situations. I think, Justin, we're big fans of Dave Canales, and we do believe that he's going to elevate this offense, and they're going to be able to utilize Jatavion Sanders. They drafted him pretty in a good spot, and I think that he has potential to be a really good tight end for Bryce Young, and I think Bryce Young is going to be looking at him when there's those key 3rd down situations. So, never really had a great tight end. There's never really, he never really had that going through last year. So, Sanders has the talent to be that guy. With Theo Johnson, he's a pretty decent, talented guy, but he gets the volume now. You mentioned Darren Waller is going to retire. And now that they have Nabers there, they're going to need a complement guy to go along with Nabers. So Theo Johnson is going to be that fall guy for Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, whoever is the quarterback. And then with Ben Sinnott, I mean, that's going to be a guy that could be the best out of these, a little bit more of a sneaker guy, just because of he's might be on the best offense out of all these three, especially even Brock Bowers. So maybe Daniels can look to a guy like this. We still love Zach Ertz, Justin, but he's getting up there in age. We're not sure how many years or how many games he has left in him. So definitely Ben Sinnott is another guy that you can look at. And out of these guys to draft, I mean, I think you could draft all these guys, but towards the late. I'm thinking between 12 and 14, Justin. If you don't go early for the Laportas, the Mark Andrews, the Travis Kelce's, and even the Kittles in the first four to 5 rounds, I think you can definitely wait for a guy like a Jatavian Sanders or even a guy like Theo Johnson, who's going to be slipping already into that number one role already, and a team that's going to desperately need to put points on to win games early off. So to rank these guys, I'm going to go Sanders because of the talent, then Johnson, then Sinnott. But if Ben Sinnott can be number one over Ertz, if Ertz, just doesn't play the whole year, then I definitely like Ben Sinnott to be the number one guy over all these tight ends, including Bowers. But I'm going to go with Sanders for right now.
All right. I like it. And with, I mentioned how I think Bowers will kind of be in that 8 to 13 of the tight end ranges. I think you could throw the next three guys in like that 15 to 22 range. So interesting there. And then the last three guys, honestly, are just quick hitters. Cade Stover for the Texans, Tip Reiman for the Cardinals, and Jared Wiley for the Chiefs. All will be backups for this year and maybe moving forward. But I like Stover's talent. He's going to be behind Dalton Schultz, and you could argue Brevin Jordan as well. And then Tip Reiman will be the direct backup to Trey McBride. And same with Jared Wiley will be the direct backup to Travis Kelce. And you could argue the most interesting thing about that is he could be the successor to Kelce because they got him in the 4th, some solid capital for Jared Wiley. But I just think their names worth keeping in the back of your mind. No redraft value, of course. Will be late, maybe not even drafted in dynasty drafts if you have 3 rounds for rookies. But yeah, just quick thoughts, maybe just a minute on what do you think these guys could do?
Yeah, so Wiley is behind a good amount of tight ends. I'm seeing Noah Gray, who's had some moments, and Irv Smith Jr., who hasn't been doing anything the last couple of years. So maybe Wiley can do something. With Cade Stover, I do like them out of all these three. Cade Stover, he could be a guy that could get some touches there. I do like CJ to look at his other Buckeye that will be joining him there in Houston. So maybe he can get some looks there at the goal line. Perfect compliment there to Dalton Schultz. And with Tip, I don't really see him doing anything there in Arizona. I think Trey McBride is a clear-cut guy there. He's going to be really good. I'd like Trey McBride to have a pretty solid tight end fantasy season, a guy that you draft in about the 7th or 8th round and get a pretty good solid tight end there. So I'm not a big fan of Tip. I think Jared Wiley is going to have some years. So Cade Stover, already the best out of these, and I do think that he has the most potential.
Yeah, okay, cool. So that wraps up tight ends. So we've hit wide receivers, we hit tight ends. Our last episode, we hit quarterbacks and running backs. And I was thinking about it. You've been having all the fun. I got to hear your beautiful take on Xavier Worthy and Brendan Rice. And last episode, we did bold predictions. I'll take those as yours. But I just wanted to throw one in, and then we'll wrap up. And I think I want to make this one. I want to say that Roman Wilson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, sleeper, I think my sleeper out of all of these wide receivers, he outscores Malik Nabers in fantasy this season. He's got some major opportunities in Pittsburgh to be the wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 1. So really excited with Roman Wilson. And if the Giants crumble like they did last year, Nabers could unfortunately be a casualty of it. So Roman Wilson outscores Malik Nabers. That's my bold prediction for today. But that wraps up our episode. This is the second of, our 2. We also had, don't forget, we had our winners and losers on Sunday night, where we discussed 5 teams that we thought were winners, 5 teams that we thought were losers, and that's just each of us. So I think I actually believe in the winners episode we talked about 9 teams, and then in the losers we talked about 8 teams. So a lot of coverage, and then obviously we had these 2. So thanks, guys. We covered a lot of draft stuff. It's not over, but we're transitioning because the schedule release will be soon, and we'll start thinking about some rankings because that is a very exciting experiment we like to do once or twice in the summer before the season gets underway. So thank you, guys, and Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dween Nation. This was such a fun couple episodes talking about fantasy. This is Dween Nation's bread and butter with fantasy. And so we're so excited to start our official, inaugural season of Dween Nation talking about fantasy. And what a better start with my guy, Justin Pius. Dween Nation,
Right.
We love y'all. And peace out.
Peace out, guys, and subscribe to the YouTube and TikTok.